One trick snowballing and winning games on Cheesebix throws off matchmaking ratings. I don't really understand that, really, to be honest. Like, some idea that, like, some player is playing a pick and wins with it, and therefore matchmaking is ruined. It's like, they're in that rating because they won enough games to be in that rating, right? It's not like they just magically got there, right? It's like... yeah, I just don't get it when you're like, yeah, this one trick doesn't deserve to be here, ruined the game. It's like, bro, that guy has a win rate such that he has gotten to your MMR, right? Like, he's there for a reason, and it's because he wins games on that character. Like, it's different if someone gets, like, boosted or something, right? But, like, I just don't really get the argument of this one trick up here ruining League of Legends. It's like, well... League of Legends is a game that you can win in many different ways, and one of the ways is to get really good at a character and win enough games such that your MMR increases. How does Riot balance champ to top lane? Do you only care if a champ has a 50% win rate, even if it's not distributed evenly in a lot of matchups? Like 60 win rate into certain champs and 40 into others? The reality is that characters don't really have that type of win rate swing. For counter picks, Moppin. So Moppin's like saying, what if a character has a 50% win rate and they win 60% of their games versus certain characters and 40% versus others? The reality of that is counter picks in League of Legends don't tend to get that sharp. The sharpest counter pick in League of Legends, can anybody guess? Can anybody guess what the sharpest, like the biggest counter in League of Legends is? Like number one counter. If you pick this champion and the enemy team has this other champion, they're doomed. Yep. It is Sylas versus Malphite. And the funny part about Sylas versus Malphite is it doesn't matter what lane the Malphite is in. Sylas versus Malphite is a lane agnostic counter pick. If the enemy team has a Malphite and you pick Sylas, you win. But those types of counter picks are overall relatively rare, and even those don't get you like super insane swings in your win rate, which does create some potential issues. I think it's a very reasonable thing to be like, well, what if this character like wins all its games versus the characters it counters and loses all the other ones, right? That could make a 50% win rate look actually like really weird in terms of actual like gameplay. But yeah, we tend to balance top laners around win rate. And we tend to see that these swings in picks versus counter picks are not nearly as big as you would think they are, with a few exceptions, like Sylas and Malphite. There is a reason we don't have lethality boots. Yeah, so boots often have premium stats on them. Ignore the attack speed boots. Magic Pen is a premium stat. It's not easy to pick up. There's not many sources of it. And we also tend to like when mages as a class, like just the idea of magic damage spikes to some degree. The idea of magic damage spiking is like kind of like around roughly the balance that magic damage is expected to have in League of Legends. It's like magic damage characters, for the most part, spike early, burst you out, and then fall off if the game progresses. Unless, of course, they're like Azir or Kayle who have sustained magic damage. And so Magic Pen boots are intended to be like a fairly strong spike that like lets them, you know, get ahead. The spike for that for Assassins is intended to be Serrated Dirk, or at least it was. I think we've since actually made Serrated Dirk significantly weaker very recently. But there's like, for like literal half a decade plus, like Serrated Dirk was the equivalent spike for Assassins. Whereas it would be worse if we had a Serrated Dirk on boots, because then that makes a lot more characters have like an optimal lethality purchase. Where it's like we don't necessarily want most physical damage characters to be able to spike into that as easily. Whereas most magic damage characters, we're like, yeah, we intend magic damage to spike a bit earlier through things like Sorc shoes. And yeah, and then if we ever do want that spike for Assassins, I would say the place to do it would be Serrated Dirk. It would be give Serrated Dirk some AD or lethality back to make it a really a stronger spike. Do you ever get tilted like this champ is BS overtuned? Do you look at it from a different angle? The things that tend to frustrate me most at this point in my cycle as a game dev is the things that I don't think our balance strategy captures. And so I tend to get frustrated when I see characters who, to me, are blatantly overpowered, or on the flip side, terrible, but because they aren't captured by like how our balance strategy works, they kind of just chill. To me, that like tends to be somewhat frustrating. Although nowadays I just don't get really frustrated at much. It's just like, you know, life goes on. A character, as an example, who can frustrate me is Kai'Sa when she's overpowered. Mainly because when Kai'Sa is overpowered, it is my belief that Kai'Sa being overpowered is not indicated by her win rate or ban rate, basically. It's like Kai'Sa when OP probably has a 50% win rate, 51% win rate max. Kai'Sa when OP probably doesn't have that high of a ban rate. But the reason I think Kai'Sa as a character can be OP is because there'll be certain builds and metas for that champion where she has no weaknesses and can be picked with anything and into anything without really caring about who she's up against or who she's with. And to me, that's OP from like a champ design standpoint, where it's like, how do you like give AD carries strengths and weaknesses when sometimes there might be a character who's not expressing them. Now, that said, Kai'Sa is an incredible character, and most of the time she's totally fine and super well balanced and does have strengths and weaknesses. Because, you know, we can balance Kai'Sa around having shorter range and balance her around having, you know, like a weak laning phase. But then there's certain metas and builds that pop up for her where her laning phase isn't all that weak. And the fact that she has short range doesn't matter all that much. And like, you know, like sometimes there's metas where Kai'Sa is like one of the best items she can build is a Zhonya's Hourglass. And it's like, okay, so she's this AD carry who pumps out all this damage and can go invuln at any given time. And so it's a thing where it's like, sometimes the statistical balance of the game might not necessarily represent the exact power of characters. But again, that's all my personal opinion. I also have my own biases, right? Like, I'm probably less likely than others to be able to see when Jinx is overpowered, as an example, right? But yeah, sometimes I'll just run into a character and I'm like, this character is 50% win rate and broken. And other times I'll be like playing with or as a character and I'll be like, this character is 50% win rate and really, really, really weak. And that's a lot harder to justify a buffer nerf for, I would say.